Welcome to episode 20 of the SU Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Manning, and I've got a special treat for you today. I'm interviewing Kelly Beaumont, who is a coach and a women's health expert. She specialises in menstrual health. And the reason that I've got her on the podcast is because I talk about confidence at work, and I think this is a key component. As women, we have a cycle, and we don't get up and feel the same every day. We don't get up and perform the same every day. But I don't know about you, but I didn't really feel like I was able to kind of confidently deal with this because I don't really know that much about it. And I've decided that I'm going to change that this year so that I can work with my cycle a bit better. So Kelly's coming on the podcast today to talk to us about all things hormonal health and what you can do to help yourself. But we're also going to be teaching a free class together on the 23rd of November, and I'm inviting you all to come. I've hired Kelly to come and do this class because I want to know more, but I don't just want to know more. I want you guys to know more too, so that you can feel more confident with your hormonal health too. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes, or you can go to my website, www.yesucoaching.com, and you can sign up for the class there. If you can't attend live, get the replay. It's 2022. Feel that we probably should know how to deal with our hormonal health. Without further ado, here is my interview with Kelly. Welcome to the podcast, Kelly Beaumont.
Oh, thanks for having me, Anna. It's lovely to be here.
You're very welcome. And to everybody who is listening to the lovely audience of the SU Coaching Podcast, I have a special treat for you today because we've got Kelly Beaumont with us, who I'm going to ask to introduce herself. But I met Kelly this year, and I have started to think about how to more confidently deal with my hormones, with my cycle, and all of those lovely things. And Kelly walked into my life just at the right moment because she knows about all of these things, and she's got some stuff that she's going to share with us and teach us today. So, Kelly, can you introduce yourself any way you would like to?
I absolutely can. Yeah. So that was lovely, by the way. I feel like you walked into my life at the right time for slightly different reasons, but lovely to hear that. So I guess my job is a little bit twofold at the moment. So I work in a corporate organization in learning and development, so a fintech company. And what I do on the side is Olive Avocado, which is my company, and it focuses around female hormones, female health, menstrual cycles, and all of that juicy good stuff. And that, I guess, came from my own experiences and wanting to then educate other women, because I feel like it's something that just isn't spoken about as much as it should be, and it impacts each of us every single day of our lives. So
yeah, absolutely. And when you say that, I think, it's 2022, and yet most of us are still, especially in the world of work, keeping pretty quiet about how this stuff impacts our day to day. And it was one of the things that I think I shared with you initially, was that on the first day of my period, every cycle, I feel terrible. I can't concentrate. I'm like scatty. I can't sit to anything really. And I realized that I was never saying anything. So when people would ask me, oh, how are you on that day? I'd be like, yeah, fine, thanks. And the truth was, I felt like shit. I couldn't concentrate. My mind was likely to wander, all of that. And then in the end, I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to start telling the truth. Like, it's 2022. This is ridiculous that I'm just keeping quiet. So I just started saying, oh yeah, I feel terrible today because it's the first day of my period. And at that point, I was in an all male management team. And at first they were like, okay. And in fairness to them, after like the second or third time, they were like, oh, right, okay. And just completely rolled with it. So it was never as bad as what I thought it might be when I started actually sharing it. But that made me think, like, how much do we know? How much do we share? How much do we understand? And how, like, honest are we about the impact that this has on us? And I put a thing on LinkedIn that I was thinking about. If you haven't heard anything on your hormones since the period nurse came into school in the 80s or the 90s for some of you, then like, how mad is that?
Yeah.
So, Kelly, you mentioned at the beginning that you'd had your own journey with it and your own story, and that was what had inspired you to kind of run the business and to become a woman's health coach and specialize in this area. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your story and how things came to be?
Yeah, I'll try and keep it quite succinct, right? Because there's so many different angles I could come at. Firstly, I'll point out that I'm the 90s child you were referring to. So, yay. Yes, that makes me feel so youthful right now. So, I think for me, it started quite some time ago, and I didn't ever realize that it would have been this thing that acted as a huge impactor in the future. So I was one of those people, like many, who went to the doctor at the age of 13 with symptoms of heavy periods, terrible skin, just not in a good place, right? And the answer to the problems was a 10-minute consultation and a prescription of the contraceptive pill. And that was my life for the next decade, right? Taking this pill pretty much every day for 21 days, 7 days off, thought that was a period, and that was that. And I went through those years of my life quite angry, like cyclically quite angry with the world, and just never really knew what was going on. And then fast forward to when I got married, made the decision that I would come off contraceptive pill because we wanted to look at trying for a baby. And after we successfully, fell pregnant, I had my wonderful daughter. I then dealt with the barrage of postnatal hormones and all of the turmoil that can come with that. And it was at that point that I thought, do you know what? Like, all of my life, my hormones have dominated how I think, feel, and act every single day. And yet I have no understanding, no awareness, and therefore no empowerment to know how to deal with these things to better support myself. And it just really was like fuel to the fire. And I always knew that I had this kind of entrepreneurial mindset. I think so many people do, right? And I just didn't know what my niche was. And this thing came up and I was like, this is it. It's been with me this whole entire time. And I now just need to educate myself and learn about it. So that's exactly what I did. And then the more I learned, the more I needed to share. And here we are today, a few years down the line, me trying to educate other women on the stuff that I didn't know either.
Brilliant. Yeah. And when you talk about like the thing that made you like rage and the thing that made you angry, I always think, yeah, like if you can tell me what makes you enraged, I can tell you what is important to you in life. And I know everyone's like, we need to be like mild mannered and we need to be like nicey, and we all need to be very under control. And I'm like, no, what makes you rage?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what's important to you.
And I couldn't agree more, Anna. The thing for me is understanding what the authentic version of you is, and whatever that means to other people. What I mean by that is it's you not on any form of artificial hormone replacement, right? The thing that was frustrating for me is that rage existed and still does, and I'm really proud of it actually. But the problem before is it was artificial and it was compounded by hormones that weren't mine. And that was the thing that was frustrating, because I wasn't seeing the real version of me. And I speak to so many women that had heightened anger because they were on birth control pills. That for me is the problem, not the rage that sits beneath it. Because I'm with you. That's powerful stuff, right?
Yeah. And what, like, to give us an idea, as much as you feel like you want to share, what was the impact for you on being on that mechanical hormone for all of those years?
Well, let's not go into all of the health impacts, because I think we could get really technical here and I could probably annoy a lot of GPs, and I don't want to get any PI claims on the back of this podcast, right?
Don't worry, I used to be a PI lawyer. I think we're good.
Yes, let's go. Let's do it. Yeah, I think for me, the impacts were that I guess I really lost sight of who I was as a person. I really didn't know why I was acting the way that I was to certain things. Like, it felt like I was acting really irrationally to a lot of situations. I think I hurt a lot of people, not physically, but throughout that, I used to push people away probably more than I ever needed to. I used to get angry with people more than I ever needed to, like the people really close to me. And I think I think I was just so out of touch with what my body actually needed, because I guess I wasn't ever really listening to it, which sounds really deep, but I guess that's the reality of what happens, right? We're not really listening to our bodies. We're just concealing it and the challenges that it's probably facing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's it. That coincides with what you were saying about going to your GP and having a 10-minute consultation and then coming out with this thing that's designed to mask everything that you're telling them, or maybe it's designed to support you, but that feels a bit similar. It's like not what's actually going on here and how do we address it. It's like, how do we like fix it, solve it, get it gone.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think it fixes or solves it at all. But again, let's not get too technical. I think but you're absolutely right in saying that what it does is it just gives this kind of cookie cutter solution where actually the root cause will still exist. As soon as you stop taking that pill, if you've not addressed the underlying root cause, well, guess what? It's still going to be there at the other end. And what we don't do is educate young girls or the people that are supporting these young girls on actually the symptoms of early periods, which is heavy periods, bad skin, like all of the things that I went to the GP for support on actually were really normal and really common.
Yeah. So tell us then, you did this, you went on this journey of learning, and you learned about like what is happening with my hormones, how does this impact us? And I guess that went wider than learning about it just for you, and it turned into learning about it more broadly for women. Can you just start to talk to us a little bit about what you learned?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the key things, and this feeds into the session that we're going to be doing together, Anna, later this month. What I learned is that kind of hormone shifts happen and change throughout our lives, right? Our early cycling years through to our reproductive years, postnatally, perimenopausally, menopause and postmenopause. At all of those checkpoints, our hormone levels chop and change. And thus the impact of that and the symptoms that we have as a result of that shift as well. And without educating what those things look like, you can be left questioning, is something wrong with me? Like, or you can start questioning, like, psychologically, are there challenges there? So I think that's the first thing. The other thing, and this is the really important bit for me, I think we're doing lots of great work at the moment around menopause, but for me, it's those key reproductive years as well, right? From when those young women go into their first kind of corporate job or whatever job they go into, all the way up into perimenopause. Like, there's no education around how to work in accordance with our cycle. And yet I am not the same person on day 10 as I am on day 20 of my cycle. In fact, I'm like Jekyll and Hyde, and until I understood that there was reasons for that, I really did punish myself. And that feeds into all of the work that you talk to, Anna, around confidence, right? Unless you understand these moments, you can be left with imposter syndrome. You can be left questioning your capability. You can really doubt yourself. Like, the list is pretty endless. And that for me was just, we have to talk about this stuff, right? We just have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you're talking about it, 'cause it's like, well, we can't actually leave it to anyone else. If you think there should be more education, great, do it. You're doing it. We're doing it. This is why we're doing it. That's why we're doing the podcast. And I guess it would be good to go a little bit into, actually, no, first, something that makes me rage. This podcast is going to be peppered with things that make us rage. Things that make me rage. One of them is that we started talking about menopause in the workplace. Brilliant. And I'm like, what about all the years before? It doesn't come as some like magical fucking thing that just falls out of the sky and suddenly it's like, what? This has been happening for like the last 20 or 30 years by the time that happens. And yet we're not talking about it because that is a question that I've got for you. Like, why aren't we? What is that thing? And the only thing I can come up with is that essentially it's shameful to be a woman.
Ooh, wowzers. Yeah, I mean, look,
I can't come up with anything else.
Yeah, well, look, let's start by saying, and this podcast episode is probably going to be quite spicy, right? So maybe you should put that on the description.
I put an explicit warning on my on my podcast.
Yes, I noticed that actually earlier. Let's start by saying that female health is under-resourced and underfunded, and you can say that about the general kind of health industry, right? But for many years, a lot of the studies that have been done have been predominantly done on men, and thus we completely misrepresent women throughout those studies and throughout those kind of research findings. So that, let's start by saying that. Secondly, to your point around, we do this work around menopause, couldn't agree more. I think we should, by the way, this isn't to remove that narrative, but actually what we need to acknowledge is what women tend to experience in the perimenopausal years is almost a mirror image of what they experience in their early cycling years. So right when they first start their period. So why don't we start doing a load of work right at the beginning, so that when we get to those later stages of life, we're having a better experience. The problem, Anna, is we didn't address the root cause. It goes all the way back to what we spoke to before. Unless we're getting into the kind of nuts and bolts, we're just pushing out this problem to later in life. So when we get around to perimenopause, we're just having a more tumultuous experience because we haven't done that root work.
Yeah. So let's do a bit of it now. And this is like, I guess, only going to be a taster of the conversation which is to come, because as Kelly said, we're doing a class which is going to be on the 23rd of November. It's a free class for people who are in my community. Kelly is going to teach us all about the cycling years into perimenopause, menopause, to what it is we should know and we don't know that she's been talking about, and how to confidently like hone our hormones is the name of the class. How do we work with this stuff instead of working against it? But if you could just give us a bit of a taste here in terms of what should we be expecting to learn if we come to that class and we find out more? And I guess, is it good to like start there, as you say, at the beginning in those early years? Now, not many women that are listening to this podcast are going to be, I know the demographic of people because I can see it in the podcast, and it's over 20s. It mostly is over 30s into 40s and 50s. So we've got quite a lot of women's kind of reproductive health years covered there.
Yeah, love it. Look, let's be really clear, wherever you're at, and if you're hearing this, it's not, oh gosh, I should have started 20 years ago. Like, if you're at that point, amazing. If you're right at the beginning of this journey and we've caught you early, perfect. But if you're in your 40s, or even if you're in your 50s, like, this isn't a problem. It's about understanding it from today and thinking about what changes you can make from here on out. What I would say is, you could do all of that root work right at the beginning when you first start having your periods, but then what compounds your symptoms is how you live your lifestyle. And that's the stuff that we can talk to, right? Whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, beyond. And it's, for me, it's that balance between the science and then how you support that in the choices that you make on a day-to-day basis. And that's what that 90-minute session is going to talk to. It's going to talk to what typically happens to those hormones throughout all of those kind of checkpoints that we've spoken to, and then within that, how to work with your menstrual cycle, those fluctuating hormones throughout any given month, what you're likely to see throughout those kind of different days, and then personally for you to reflect on how you might be impacted and how you can support that through your lifestyle choices.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if that is, I'm guessing there's things that are common like throughout those different checkpoints that you refer to, but I'm guessing that there's also personal elements of this in terms of how people experience it and then what they need to do to support themselves.
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on. Like, I think the best example to bring this to life, and I feel like this is a really relevant one for your audience, Anna, because for me it's confidence related. So let's talk to the point of ovulation in the cycle, right? This typically, for a lot of women, is where we feel at the top of our game. Because if you think about it from a reproductive point of view, we want to be seen. Effectively, our body is trying to get us to fall pregnant, whether that's our mission or our intention or not. So our body therefore encourages us to go out and be social, make friends, mate, whatever that looks like. So for a lot of women, it's that kind of peacock time. I feel really good. I look good. Like, I want to go out. I want to chat. Amazing. However, if you are somebody who doesn't want to be seen, who prefers to be a little bit more kind of behind the scenes, maybe you really struggle at the point of ovulation. So I can sit here and say, ovulation is where every single woman feels like Beyonce. And somebody might be in that class thinking, I don't fucking want to be Beyonce. I want to be everything but Beyonce. So if we just create this like one version of the truth, The danger is that we encourage women to think that they should act and operate in a specific way. And that for me is fundamentally flawed. So what I will talk to is what happens from a scientific point of view to your hormone levels, and then encourage each individual in that class, whatever we're calling it, lecture, don't know, don't want to get too technical, people.
No, definitely not a lecture.
Yeah, I was just thinking, oh, no, not for me. But ultimately, in that chat, get everybody to reflect on what that might mean for them, and therefore how they might want to support that point in their cycle, so that they feel at their happiest, I guess.
Yeah. And amazing, because I'm just thinking, like, listening to this through people's ears, because I'm kind of hearing this from you for the first time. I'm like, how many of us, because I'm thinking about me here, how many of us have sat down and thought about what that looks like throughout the month with an actual understanding of the science, and then been like, how does this impact me? And therefore, what do I want to do throughout the month? What do I feel like when? How do I work with it? Like, how many of us have done that? I definitely haven't. And
yes,
I mean, how is it me, or is it ridiculous that we
yeah.
that
Do you know,
we don't
honestly,
do that and we haven't done it? It's like, what is going on here?
well, let's think about how the standard working week operates, right? Like, I believe that currently that the working world in the majority of places, let's talk about corporate, because I know that that's a lot of touch points for a lot of people, that is set up for a male dominated environment. You know, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, operating in these kind of 24-hour windows, get up, go again, get up, go again, get up, go again. So we are led to believe that that's how we are meant to function. That is not how women function. We are not the same person. As I mentioned earlier, we are not the same person day in, day out. Yet, because society tells us that's how we should operate, that's how we think we need to live our lives. But how empowering for somebody like you, Anna, that you run your own business, right? Like, you're your own boss. So you get to decide when you do your thinking time. You get to decide when you do your social events, your podcast recordings, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And you should be planning your month around that. You shouldn't be saying every Monday I'll do this, every Tuesday I'll do this. You should be saying, I don't know, week 1 will look like this, week 2 will look like this, 3, 4. Do you see? Like, that's for me where women get the best out of themselves and potentially promote the best confidence. And I'm conscious about bringing this back to confidence, because I know that's the language that we're speaking here, but it's true. If we can support ourselves in the best possible ways, we're going to produce the best results for us. And that is the game-changing stuff that I love to do.
Yeah, that's amazing, because just thinking about how you would just wake up, go again, wake up, go again, wake up, go again, 5 days a week is, you're right, that is not a woman's timetable. And it's almost, it's not even the timetable of nature, right? Nature has seasons, it ebbs, it flows, all of that, and so do we. Maybe they're every 28 days or whatever. But it that isn't really accounted for in the worlds that most of us work in.
Correct.
So, and I'm guessing we're going to be talking about that. And you've said that we're going to look at, what does this look like for you? Like, when you come to the class, you'll get like a time to think about this individually. How do I support myself? What does that look like within my context? But for the people that are thinking, well, that's great for Anna, because she runs her own business and she might have the first day of a period, she might just sit under a blanket and watch the Great British Bake Off. Never done that, by the way. Did do that this month. How did they're thinking, like, how do I do this when my life is get up and go 5 days a week?
Yeah. And hey, look, you're preaching to the choir here, right? I have a little girl. There has to be routine, right? There are certain moments in life which enforce and have to have this kind of, I don't know, day-to-day pattern. So I'm not ignoring that. And I would never try to instill practices that aren't sustainable. For me, it's about the acknowledgement that, you know, pushing your agenda to 110% every single day of every single week is not cool, right? And it's just going to burn you out. And when your hormones are waving those little white flags and you're saying, piss off, go away, like, they're going to turn into massive red flags unless you start listening to them. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, you come to that class and you learn about what's going to happen in the weeks to weeks, and you think about where you can potentially start making some smaller adjustments. So you might be able to go harder at a certain week in the month. Whereas at other points, you might have to really honor that you can only do your scheduled hours at work. Or it might be that you walk away from that class and your action is to inform somebody, and that might be your boss, right? You might want to say to your boss, look, I need you to understand a little bit about how I operate. Maybe listen to this podcast recording. Like, I just want people to walk away from it feeling like they have control in some capacity to support their hormones, because the only person that's going to support and honor your own hormones is you. So to sit there and say, I can't make any changes, well, guess what? There'll become a point in your life where you have to. And typically that's when women hit perimenopause. And that's when women hit that big breeze block wall and they have to do something. So isn't it better to start thinking about how you can make small tweaks so that when you get there, you're in a better position and it's not as kind of, I don't know, 180 and you have to shift your entire life?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Powerful.
We're taking you to church this week, guys. Listen to this on a Sunday morning.
I'd love to think about where you and I are at in our cycles, because if we're at about the same place, like this is just going to be going, we're just going to be like bouncing off each other. This could get really intense.
You know what? We should have said what day we were on at the beginning.
Yes,
actually, you'll know what day you're on, but I might have to work it out. What am I on? Like, I'm on like day 1, 2, 3. I'm on like day 4.
Oh,
no,
okay.
No. I'm on day 8. Sorry.
Oh, perfect. You're heading into a good place. Well, in theory, so the hormones might tell us you technically should be feeling a little bit more energized. So yeah, I'm around about I think I'm day 11. So we're not too far apart.
No. Yeah. Okay. So maybe the same. Maybe the same. And actually, that is something I want to come back to, that perimenopause point, because I think it would be worthwhile touching on that, because I think that'll be interesting for people in my community too. But I just wanted to touch on this idea of like, what day are you on? And I would never really have known that in the past. And I kind of make it my business to have a vague idea now. Maybe I didn't do that well at today, but I like to know that, because I think it informs me a little bit to help me think, okay, so I'm like on day 24 and I'm crying at the news and I feel really like despondent about things, and I'm like, oh, it's day 24. I remember that I often feel like that on day 24 for me. So then I can be like, oh yeah, actually, in terms of confidence, I'm not actually having a crisis of confidence. It's just day 24. And when I worked in my corporate job, I used to say to my female team members, like, what day are you on today of your cycle? And they'd be like, oh, actually, it is like day whatever. And we'd be like, okay, how do you normally feel on that day? And they'll say, oh, and to be honest, that probably should be a standard kind of conversation that we can have with each other, and we kind of have an idea of what that means for us and for other people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, honestly, I couldn't agree more. I think if you've got a partner, you should have a calendar up on the fridge, whatever, they should know where you're at and they should understand what that means. If you're a people leader, like this should be standard practice in a monthly one-to-one or a weekly one-to-one catch-up, right? Like it matters. Understanding this stuff matters. And I absolutely feel that having an awareness of where you're at in your cycle for numerous different reasons is so fundamentally important. And specifically speaking to the point around perimenopause, how are you going to know if there's changes in your cycles unless you're tracking your cycles? Like, it's going to be a finger in the air situation. Whereas if you've got data from years and years before, which tell you what your cycles are, and you've got this consistency, and then you start to see these moderate shifts, it allows you to understand that things might be happening for you. And how empowering is that you can take control and know when things are starting to change for you. And that, for me, that, like, if everyone could walk away from that class committing to tracking their cycles, then that for me is a huge win.
There you go. Kelly's job done. Does everybody know what day they're on when they move on? We'll be sending you random emails to check what day you're on and see if you know. No, I'm kidding. But specifically then, on to the perimenopause point, what does that mean? Because there's going to be people listening who are like, I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, of course. Understandably, right? And there is no shame to anybody who doesn't understand this stuff, because as your post said, there usually isn't a conversation for when the period nurse was in many, many moons ago. Perimenopause refers to the kind of period in time before periods stop ultimately, and it's when women or those who have periods start to experience changes in their cycle and menopause symptoms. And I could get really technical with this, but I just want to keep it really high level. And it typically happens somewhere between 2 and 12 years before menopause. Now, the really important terminology to understand here is menopause is a one-day event, and it happens 12 months after your final period. Anything before that, you were in perimenopause. Anything after that, you're in postmenopause. And I think this language gets continuously misused and misrepresented. But perimenopause ultimately is typically where most of the turbulence tends to happen for women, and most of those changes and the symptoms in relation to that as well.
Okay. And so I know that this won't be a hard and fast rule, but how would somebody typically know that they might be experiencing perimenopausal symptoms?
Yeah, I think there's a few different symptoms, but I suppose the most common things that you would start to notice, first and foremost, is the change in cycle lengths. So you might notice that cycles start to get a little bit closer together as the first thing. And what you might also start to notice is that your periods tend to get a little bit heavier. And the reason for those initial changes is because what's happening in early perimenopause is that estrogen is much higher than your progesterone levels. And when you've got higher estrogen levels, think back to when you first started having periods, right?
Yeah.
Think back to those early days, you had quite heavy periods and they would come quite frequently. And that's technically what's happening in early perimenopause. So you'll start to notice those things typically, and then you might start to experience the things like the hot sweats or the palpitations is quite a common symptom as well. Brain fog, weight changes, those types of things. All of these things are manageable, by the way, and you can support these symptoms, but just speaking openly so people are aware what might happen.
Yeah.
There are other things as well, Anna, but I don't want to spend 3 hours talking about that.
Yeah, okay. And I promise for anyone who's coming to the class, we won't let her spend 3 hours talking about them then either. 90 minutes,
I thought I had
90 minutes maximum. No, we could be here all day. We could be here all day. In a good way. And actually thinking about it, like if 90 minutes is all we dedicate to learning about our own health, and as you call it, like empowering yourself, and I think it is, then that's actually a very small amount of time, right? For the rewards that it could reap.
Yes.
And that was the next thing I kind of wanted to ask you about, was like, what good does it do? And I know that you know this firsthand because you've done it for yourself. And I know that also you work with women to think about this stuff. What rewards do you see that does it bring to people's lives when they understand this stuff and they know how to work with it?
Yeah. I mean, the list is pretty endless, but like things that come to mind is like true self-confidence and true self-compassion, true self-love, like just the acknowledgement that you're not. The first ever time that I ran a program, I called it "You're Not Failing," and I truly believe that that's what I'm trying to tell people, that you're not failing. At any point, you go from feeling like you are running the world to next week you feel like you're not capable of very much at all. Like that is just an acknowledgement that you're a different place in your cycle. And sure, there might be other things happening around you that you need to focus on and work on, but also your hormones have a huge contributing impact to those things. And I want to empower women to understand that you don't need to question yourself, question your capability. You absolutely don't need to expect the same from yourself every single day of your cycle. And as I said earlier in the podcast, that is a flawed concept, and we have to do better in encouraging women to understand that they shouldn't expect that of themselves, and nor should anybody around women expect that of them.
Yeah. So, and that's an interesting point to bring out, is that the idea that we should all be the same every day and that we should all be able to, feel the same every day and do the same things every day is literally patriarchal conditioning in your own head without you noticing it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And this is the thing, right? And so much of the work that you do will speak to this, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, balls to that is all I can say.
I'll bet.
that is not what we want. So let me just see if there's anything else that I was like, I must ask you about this. No. Is there anything else that you would like people to know from listening to this podcast, or that you would like them to have an idea about? Obviously, we're running the free class and people are going to come and find out more there. But is there anything else that you want to say, you want to share?
I think we've already I think that final point around, like, I just want people to know that they're not failing. I suppose the single best thing that you can do is support your hormones. Like, everything then generates from there. So if you can get those kind of foundational bedrock pillars sorted, like, you can build on all of the things that you need to from that point. Every single day we are in our menstrual cycle, right? Whether we're on our period and it's that visible thing, or whether we're at kind of a later point in our period when actually things get a bit more funky. When we're on our period, that's the kind of most balanced we are, believe it or not, contrary to what society tells us. And I think acknowledging that we are in our menstrual cycle every single day, if we don't understand how to work with it, we are already working a lot harder than we need to. So if we can get that base knowledge and it becomes part of our subconscious, then think about how much you can just focus on the other stuff, and how freeing is that to know. So I think I just want people to understand that you can work with your hormones. It is super easy to do, and we're going to touch on so much of it in the work that you and I are going to do in a couple of weeks' time. So that is I feel like that's a bit of a juicy, like, drop that in. Come along if we haven't told you that already.
Drop that in. Get in the class. And yes, thank you. That's amazing. And I am excited for this class, and I'm going to be learning alongside everybody else, because I don't feel like I know as much as I could do about this stuff. And I'm like, okay, yes, I am ready. I do want to arm myself with this knowledge, and I want to understand myself better and how I can support myself. And yeah, more, as you said, more self-compassion, more self-love, more self-acceptance, more understanding. Like, that's what we're after overall. So if this is another way of doing it, then sign me up, basically.
Yay. I'm so excited to talk about this stuff, and thank you so much for opening the conversation to more and more people. This is exactly what we need, powerful women like you sharing this stuff.
Oh yeah. And for anybody who follows me on LinkedIn, you might have seen I've been taking to LinkedIn to talk about periods, which I'm sure some people have been really enjoying and some people not so much. But I think
I've been enjoying it.
Good. I'm glad you've been enjoying it. I think it's important that we start to get some of this stuff out and really talk about it, because if we don't, nothing changes. And we will have more and more generations of women who just kind of don't know and aren't educated, aren't working with their cycles, don't have the knowledge, just like women, like our grandmothers did. Well, that is not good enough in my book. So
I love that. And you know what's really powerful? To that exact point, if you're not going to do this for you, do it for the next generation of women coming through. Learn about it now so that you can tell your daughter or your granddaughter or your friend or your sister. Like, if you don't feel worthy enough of this, which, by the way, you absolutely should, and everybody should know about this, but think about how many other people you can support by knowing this stuff. Like, the benefit is endless, and I think that's the real important stuff here. It goes beyond you just knowing about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about my kind of audience, we have a lot of people managers, people leaders in there. This stuff that everybody who leads people needs to know about. Men, women, everybody, non-binary folks, like everyone. This is something that impacts half the workforce.
Agreed.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Kelly. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. I did too. I think we got, like I said, I think things got a bit spicy. There was a bit of choice language, but hopefully people stuck with us.
People on my podcast are used to choice language. It's fine.
I'll bet. Yeah.
My dad said to me recently, Anna, you swear an awful lot. And I was like, yes.
Yeah, I do.
And that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah. I'm for it. I love it.
Yeah, just don't listen with your kids. Let me make that a caveat. Or maybe you do listen to swearing podcasts with your kids, in which case, no judgment.
No judgment on parenting. No.
Thank you, Kelly. And for everyone who's listening, who isn't already signed up to the class, go to the website. I'll drop a link in the show notes. Come join the community. You can come to the class for free. You'll get a replay if you can't attend live. You can still do all that lovely learning and that reflection to start supporting yourself in terms of what you know and what you're going to do. Kelly, just one last question before you go. When do you feel you're most confident?
Oh, yes. I think it's when I truly listen to what my body needs. And that might be, I know this should be really short and snappy, but can I just give you a bit of context as to what I mean by that? Yes. So I speaking to all the things that we've just shared around working with your cycle, sometimes I want to wear like an amazing dress, and I'll go out and I'll strut my stuff wearing that dress. Sometimes I want to wear a really big fluffy jumper, and I put that really big fluffy jumper on and I feel amazing. If I try to do the counter, the juxtapose of what my body is actually needing, like that's when I feel really lacking in confidence. Whereas if my body needs something and I service it in that way, I go out and I feel bloody amazing. So I know that that's a really kind of crazy answer, but hopefully, like I thought about that before I came on. I think ultimately it comes down to that self-trust again, and trusting my mind and body and giving it what it needs, which is quite deep, but hopefully that answers the question.
It does. I love that answer.
Yay.
I love that answer.
Yay.
And I love that answer about listening. So much of the work I do is asking people to listen to what's actually going on inside, and that gets road roughshod over in our modern world and in our corporate lives and in everything we do in an attempt to kind of be a robot and put everything on the inside. What we know we need, it just gets rode over. So the more we can tap into that, the better.
Love it. Yes.
All right.
Yes to you, Anna.
Thank you, Kelly. And
thank you.
I know everyone who's listening would really like to, will really like to thank you too. But tell us last off, where can people find you? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn, same as you. So I'm Kelly Beaumont on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram at olive_avocado_coaching. And you can find my website at oliveavocado.com.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to link all of that in the show notes. So whatever you're doing, you don't need to write it down. You can just go in the show notes and you can click on it and you can find Kelly there. All right. Thank you, Kelly. And for everyone else, we will see you in the class or in the next podcast.
Yay. Thanks, Anna.
Bye.